Absolutely. Well, I want to, before we get into your life of being a retired corporate executive and a business fixer, I want to know 5 years ago, we were looking at this pandemic, trying to figure it out, knee deep into it. So many things changed. Ultimately, living through that time period, how has that affected and changed the way that you live life today?
I think the way I live life today, post-pandemic, is a lot more discretionary and a lot more intentional. I came across a quote a while back, Joe, that said, was an author that I know, frankly, and he said, "I don't know how much time I have left, but I know it isn't enough to waste any."
Yeah.
And I think pre-pandemic, there was a lot of time wasting on my part, things that got deferred, projects that never came to fruition, that kind of thing. I think post-pandemic, a lot of us woke up and said, whether it's work at home, whether it's the proximity of our friends and family, we all remember distancing, wearing masks in every store you went into. That brought home to me the urgency of actually accomplishing what you set out to do. And so that's a big difference for me, is being very discretionary, very intentional about what I do.
I think sometimes when I look around at all of us, I feel almost like a rapture happened. Not so much in like a physical, biological sense, but almost in an emotional sense, because we all kind of were dipped into that existential play of waiting for Godot. We were all sitting there figuring out what are we going to do because the past doesn't mean anything right now. It was our therapy session. We can't focus on what we've been through, but what are we going to do from this time on? And I think a lot of that has made us stronger, more emboldened. We're probably getting better art. We're getting better conversations, getting better business results. Do you think that maybe that's true?
I wish I was that optimistic.
Okay.
Okay. I am not a pessimist by any means, but I think that America has this unique ability to forget its past.
Yeah.
And in this case, I think we are dangerously forgetting some of the lessons we should have learned 5 years ago. The regard that we should have for our families, the appreciation we should have for our colleagues at work, the concern that we should have for those that are less fortunate than we are, whether they are domestic or abroad. I think it's a difficult time that we're in right now, where I remember when the financial crisis happened in 2008 to 2010, and the Canadians didn't have the same problem that we did. And the simple fact is they didn't have some of the exotic tools and mortgages that we did. And they said that, we're just a society that requires 20% down. We didn't have the foreclosure crisis that you guys did, and that's why.
Yeah.
And yet now, less than, 15 years later, 15 years on, we have different names for some of those mortgage products, but they're the same. And the housing bubble is real. And I think we just, as a society here in America, are so intent on what is ahead that we don't appreciate where we came from for very long, for very long. So I wish I shared your optimism, but not totally.
The one thing I realized when I went to Europe the first time is how young our democracy is. I got that feeling of antiquity, and I think I see exactly what you're saying. And I think about Thomas Jefferson quotes where those that are not good stewards of history tend to repeat it. And Americans are like
Yes.
that. We have a very short-term memory, and we will repeat things that should have never come back up again. But we're chronic about that. And I think it's partly due to the way that we get information, and especially now we have access to everything. So there's so much access to things, it just breeds conspiracy theory and misjudge and just misperceptions of things.
I would agree wholeheartedly. And I don't think we're a society, I don't think we've ever been a society that is willing to learn from others.
Yeah.
There are examples out there of healthcare systems in Europe, in Canada, that work.
Yeah.
They work for the population, they work for the insurer, they work for the government. Um, we don't seem to want to learn from that,
Nope.
and say, is our healthcare system optimal? I would argue it's not, clearly. Um, and if it's not optimal, what can we learn from the healthcare system in France or in the UK or in Canada, right over the border? So I think those are some examples to me that we, as a society, we are so entrepreneurial, so individualistic, so call it future focused, so interested in being the richest and the most powerful
Yep.
and the most of everything. We don't learn from our neighbors, so to speak. And I think that's a critical mistake.
Absolutely, I agree. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do right now in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of fifth grade students. It's career day. The kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer?
Okay. Well, I would first of all answer that I'm a retired corporate executive, so I have a lot of experience in senior leadership positions, both in public and private companies. I had my own consulting firm for a couple of decades, and we call it became known as turnaround guys. I didn't found it that way. I was a marketing and finance guy, but I ended up getting calls from bankers and lawyers and accountants and various people who had clients that were in trouble. And I would tell your fifth grade students that if you want to be a turnaround guy, you've got to reconcile the fact that you will never be the big man on campus or the most popular guy at the prom, because no entrepreneur ever wakes up and says, I can't wait until I'm in trouble and my banker threatens me and I have to get a turnaround guy in here to help me fix this thing.
Yeah.
But what I am today is an author and a speaker. I wrote a book called The Business of Relationships. It's been out about a year, and first time authors do first time things. So I'm learning as I go, but it's done well, and I've been able to give some presentations, been on a lot of podcasts, and grateful for this opportunity as well. And that's really what I do, working on books number two and three that are going to be radically different than the first, because I don't believe in going back to the same neighborhood more than once. But so that's what I would tell the fifth grade class.
I dig it.
you know. And I would tell some of those fifth graders too that I'm a grandpa. I'm teaching an 8-year-old how to play golf, and that's a great opportunity to give back and just have some smiles.
What did you want to be in the fifth grade? What was your dream life?
I was going to be an FBI agent.
Okay.
I actually have a file folder, if you will, that one of my grandmothers saved of letters that I wrote to J. Edgar Hoover, talking about wanting to be this FBI agent because back then the Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. show was on. It was big time popular on Sunday nights. And I thought that's where I'd be, as an FBI agent.
Interesting. Um, so how did you take me back to your childhood? What were these seeds that were planted into you to become a corporate executive, to become a leader, to become a shaper of minds, consulting? How did these foundational elements evolve into who you became?
I think it probably started with my maternal grandfather. He was a banker, one of those guys that built a small bank into a bigger bank, sold that to a still bigger bank, became a senior executive with them. And by the time I was about in the fifth or sixth grade, he was retired, but and truly retired. Not looking for another gig, not looking for a corporate board appointment or anything else. He wanted to enjoy his retirement, but he imparted to myself and my younger brothers this business ethic of working hard, helping people, being other centered. And he was a grandfather who was around. It wasn't just a Sunday dinner for 2 hours and a pat on the head. He was in your life. He and my grandmother rather. So I think that was a big influence. And I think my high school education at St. Xavier in Cincinnati. It's a Jesuit high school. It was my first experience with the Jesuits. I had 10 years with them, high school, college, and post grad. But my exposure to their emphasis on critical thinking and again, giving back to others was very important in my development. I think just being able to be that person who, as some clients said, I see around corners really well was a compliment I heard more than once. I think the Jesuits were foundational in that. Whether or not one is a fan of religious education or the Catholic Church or any other things, I think that discipline and that rigor from the Jesuits was foundational to me. And I think, another thing is being astute enough or being lucky enough to spot opportunities. I mean, I started out pretty much post college in county government, up in Illinois. It was northern Illinois, and I had graduated from Marquette in Milwaukee, matriculated 90 miles down the road to Chicago, and got involved in county government, and a number of things happened that allowed me to become director of this and then director of that and consolidate uh, departments and so forth for efficiency and other things. And I think at some point, Joe, I said, I could be this guy who gets a standard 3% raise every year, just like every other county employee, or I could be out there in the marketplace in the capitalistic society, and that's where I wanted to be, and just made my way through that. So,
Who's been a hero? Who's been an inspirational force for you to become who you are?
well, I mentioned my grandfather,
Yeah.
was a hero that I know. Obviously, I think one of the people that was a big hero to me because I worked for him was Jack Welch. From General Electric. He was the CEO and chairman of GE in the 80s and early 90s. Um, I had the opportunity to meet him. I had the opportunity to get pretty close to some of his senior lieutenants in the business that we were involved in. And he was a person that I think taught me through his orientation with the company and his direction of the company, as well as his public pronouncements. I think he taught me things like you need to be fearless about looking in the mirror when there's a problem. You need to be aware that uh, it is absolutely foundational to look at things as they are, not as you wish they were. And it's absolutely fundamental to business that you take action. It can be wrong, it can be proven wrong, and Jack has a lot of revisionist history that has gone on since his death and certainly since his retirement from GE. But when he was there, Joe, he tripled shareholder value.
Yeah.
And he bought companies and sold divisions. I think I read somewhere that he had 200 acquisitions in the time that he was chairman and CEO of General Electric. I mean, in anybody's book, that's a busy schedule.
Yeah.
So I think he would be a hero of mine, and some of the other people that you run across in business. I remember a county board chairman and a county administrator that I thought were extremely well organized, visionary, insightful, pretty fearless people. You start to emulate folks like that. So I think I've had a lot of mentors and a lot of heroes along the way.
So when you were in the thick of being in charge of prior to retirement and you were out there doing it, how did you balance everything? What was your philosophy on balance between family, friends, taking care of your soul, and doing business in the best possible way? And even now, what is that philosophy? What gets you up to get all of that done right?
Yeah, I think I was less than good at the balance part. I tended to get involved. And this is when my children are growing up. I've got three grown children, and they're all very successful. Two live out of town, out of Cincinnati, and my daughter and her husband and family are here, which is where the grandchildren are. I am very fortunate that all three of them will say things to me like I had a perfect childhood. And I look back at them as adults and say, I think you're insane. You know, I don't have that same view of me giving you a perfect childhood, you know. But I think I was not good at balancing my business responsibilities and or civic involvement and giving equal time or greater time to the family, and I'm glad I didn't pay a higher price than I had for that because, like I said, I'm very grateful and very well, we'll just leave it at grateful. I'm very grateful to have three children who have very good relationships with their dad. Uh, so I think today, when you say now I have the opportunity to look in the rearview mirror a little bit and say let's do some things differently and let's be a little bit more reflective and a little bit more honest about myself and a little bit more directional or discretionary, as we talked earlier, intentional. Um, I I like that opportunity, and I think I'm getting better at it with especially with the adult children and the grandchildren.
So,
So
yeah,
I think the ability to say no was something I I didn't do very well.
yeah,
You know?
I get
So
it. I totally get it.
yep.
So let's say you walk into a room full of people that have known you from a corporate sense, that have known you from the roles that you've played in business life, and you can walk up to that podium and tell them one fun story, one fun adventure, one fun anecdote, something that they may not know that might humanize you in a different way. What would be a really cool, fun story you would tell that group?
I wish you had submitted these questions in advance.
Sorry. What about a first concert? Just something like that, you know?
Yeah, I think what I would say is that a fun story about me is that I I have a really close relationship with my daughter.
Yeah.
And one of the fun stories that I have about her, Joe, and about my interaction with her is she is two things. She is the I have a question girl, okay, and she's been that way since preschool. And she is also the girl, not a girl anymore at age 37, but she is someone who never met a four-letter word she didn't like, you know. And um, she is a great mom and a great wife. But I say that, that relationship with her is precious to me. And when I say she never met a four-letter word she didn't like, she played fast pitch softball at a very high level all the way through high school and a little bit beyond, and went overseas and did all the kind of things with select teams and playing in World Series and that sort of thing. And that's where a lot of that came from, that hyper competitive, angry, tough, kind of environment that you play in if you're going to excel in that kind of a thing. Any of us who've played sports, at any level probably have some experience with that. So I would say that'd be something that would humanize me, that maybe people wouldn't say, gee whiz, I didn't expect that he had a high regard for his daughter and that they're very close and speak almost daily and that sort of thing. So
That's
yeah.
cool. So, in this life of both accomplishment and evolution, what are you ultimately the proudest of?
Oh, I think it's evolution. I think it's evolution. I mean, to me, accomplishment is transactional. You can have your own consulting firm. You can make it something for a couple of decades or a decade and a half or whatever. You can be the president of something. You can be the guy who's remembered in your community because of the improvements that were made to the business district and the playgrounds and the schools and things like that. But you know, the evolution of Tom is way more important to me than that because the accomplishment side of things, I can tell you right now that I could, I don't live in the same community anymore, but I could walk through the business district and I guarantee you that maybe nobody would say hi, Tom, or wow, this place looks so good because of what you did, 15 years ago. There's no institutional memory for any of that stuff that's fleeting. So no, I'll go with evolutionary every single time.
I dig it. So, Tom, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, clients, readers of your book, everybody that has known you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think today I'm much more collaborative than people give me credit for. I think I'm much more collegial than people give me credit for. I think I'm much more concerned. I know that I'm much more concerned for the disadvantaged and left behind people. I mean, it's rather late in life for me, but I enjoy giving back in a mentoring situation. I enjoy giving an address to a school. I'm about to do that in several days, next week. I enjoy imparting that knowledge with no prerequisite, no check, no honorarium, no special plaque or anything like that. So no, I think that that might surprise some people. I, I have a friend, and I just spoke to her this morning, as a matter of fact, years ago, Joe. I mean, we are talking years, if not decades ago. Uh, we were couples in a dinner club together, rotating sort of thing in the neighborhood, and that, and so she and her husband and myself and my wife had a number of dinners together. And I'll never forget, she said to me one time when we were together, she said, I want to tell you something, Tom. She said, I love you, but you are serious, arrogant, and cold. Okay. But I love you. And, and I think back, and we have a chuckle about once or twice a year when we're together about that. And she remembers it too. But I think she would say, that's not true today.
Yeah,
That's not you. And I think, all of us learn in different ways. All of us capture information and use it in different ways. But I think if you're not open to either one of those, then you will be that person who is described 20 years from now the way you're described today. And that would be a fate worse than death for me, is to be described the same as I was 20 years ago.
absolutely. I totally agree. I'm going to ask you two Cincinnati centric questions. First of
Okay.
all, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Second of all, what's the greatest thing about living in Cincinnati, Ohio?
Small town environment, big city conveniences, and big city entertainment options. Simple. We are a metropolitan area of a little over 1 million people. The city proper is about 350,000 ish. It is very accessible, east, west, north, south, but it has major league options for young people, for entrepreneurs, for families. Obviously, it's a very family oriented city. And you look at the Bengals, you look at the Reds, you look at the FC Cincinnati, major league soccer, if you're into that. You've got two great universities here with good basketball teams, but even more premier educational opportunities. I think the parochial and public school systems are extremely strong. It's just a city that has a lot to recommend it, geographically, as well as economically and socially for people as well.
I love it. So, Tom, if anyone wants to pick up your book, they want to reach out, they want any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
They go to Amazon. The book is called The Business of Relationships. We didn't talk too much about it, but it's a compilation of essays that use business quotes as the foundation for essays on 12 critical qualities that people must have if they're going to have a thriving personal relationship with anyone. This is not a business book, but it's available on Amazon, The Business of Relationships. And yeah, yeah, I would go there, you know, first choice. I mean, there are bookstores and there are Barnes and Noble online and so on and so forth, but we all know the big dog in the parade is Amazon. So I would go there and they'll deliver it to you in a day.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. Speaking of business quotes, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
I think the best advice that I ever got was there's so much of it. You stumped me again. I I think the best advice I ever got was when in doubt, look in the mirror.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think so many of us, whether it's in business or not, we want to look outside. We want to look outside to blame. We want to look outside to, uh, honor someone or look outside of ourselves to emulate someone. I think especially when it comes to critiquing, that's a dangerous game to play if you're always going to be in the blame game. So I try to first look in the mirror and say, where am I falling short? Where do I need to accelerate my performance? Where do I need to be more gracious or more honest or more trustworthy or any number of things that contribute to people. So I think the look in the mirror is critical.
Absolutely. Tom, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. I really wanted to scratch the surface to get everyone out to get your book and to dive more into your world. So this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a great time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate it.
Best of luck to you.
Yeah, same to you, man. Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.